Okay, so today's topic, the three golden rules to manifesting your desired reality. Have no fear, cause I am here. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Fulu. I'm a spiritual growth coach, and I'm here to guide you. Feel free to join the Patreon just for one-on-one conversations. That's where the community is at. I really advise that you guys go there. But first things first, we're gonna get into the video. No bullshit. The first thing that you guys should understand is understanding the three planes of existence. All right. So, you guys can check out my full 1 hour video on this whole thing. This is basically the basics, the blueprints of manifestation. However, these are the three golden rules, not in any particular order, because all of them are just as important as each other. None of them are less important. All right. So now let's get into this. This over here is, your desired reality. This is the place you want to be. You probably you probably don't want to get your heart broken. You probably want to buy all the things you want. You want money. You just want to be happy. This is basically what we're all chasing, right? And then in what makes up your desired reality is basically the three planes of existence. You the mental, the physical, and spiritual plane. These three make up your desired reality. Think about it almost as like Roman pillars, like how the Romans had the pillars, and then there's like a little thing. If you only use one pillar, then your shit's gonna flip and collapse. If you don't use all the pillars, then obviously it's gonna collapse. So obviously using one pillar is damn near a death sentence. So I like to break this up into percentages so it's easier to understand. And as you can see over here, if people gravitate towards just one pillar, they're only using 33.33% of the manifestation powers they are able to use in order to manifest their true 100% of reality. So like I said, only focusing on one pillar is basically a death sentence, but your reality is going to collapse. You're not going to be at the place you want to be. So now first let's understand what these three planes are. So the first one we'll get into is the mental plane. The mental plane is a realm of cause. The mental plane has no relation to time, which is something of the physical. I think this is yeah this definition right here is the one I use the most. The mental plane is the womb of reality. So this is where every single thought that you've ever had resides. This is where thoughts in general resides. I sort of say this is where the place of immaterialized thoughts and ideas are from. If anybody has ever had an idea to create, it is most likely came from the mental plane. This phone first was first a product of the mental plane. People thought about shit and then they sort of made it. That's why I say it has no time, because anybody can have this particular thought. So you call it ideas. I feel like ideas are not only I feel like ideas are not necessarily fixed to one person. I think it's more of something you can tap into. This is why I think people are able to have similar ideas. And then now this is the physical plane. This physical plane right here, I think this is what most people struggle with, at least when it comes to putting all their energy into one pillar. I feel like this is the pillar most people are using, only forgetting about the rest of these, which is why they might not be at the place they want to be. All right, so now let's understand what the physical plane is. The physical plane is basically everything we have ever known. It's reality. It's everything you see. It's everything physical. Everything material. So like money, uh, just anything physical, like the phone I said, just like everything I'm looking at right now. This whole setup that I'm using right now. So what's important to understand is that reality is merely an illusion. So you be looking at this, you be like, what's like, what does that mean? Because like all the smart people like be saying, if the smart nigga said it, then it's gotta be true. You know what I mean? Now I'm playing. So what illusion is basically a fancy way of saying it's a trap. It's not what it seems to be, because people can put in all the physical work they want, but then that does not mean that they will get their desired reality. And this is why I say most people struggle with it. Most people think that if they're able to work hard or just do a whole bunch of physical bullshit, then they will be able to sort of get the money they want. But then think about it like this: when that's not the law of the universe, just because you work hard does not necessarily mean that you receive money. You know, there's people that's like out here breaking their backs, sweating in the sun, doing hard jobs, doing construction. There's people doing construction, bro, getting paid less than content creators, bro. Just because you put in the physical work does not mean that you manifest your desired reality. But then obviously people are eluded to the fact that they think, putting in a bunch of effort will get them out of the place they want to be. But then that's not the case, because in reality, you're just using 33.33% of what you could, of the full 100% that you could use, which is basically the other planes. So now, let's get into the spiritual plane. The spiritual plane connects reality to the higher power. So obviously this is the internal. This is, we're all connected. We're all one. It's the pain bucket theory. This is something I'm gatekeeping for now. The pain bucket theory, we will get into that. But then basically, this is basically the first step to understanding. You don't want to put all of your effort in one of these planes, because if you do, then you will not be able to manifest your desired reality. So that is the first golden rule. You need to ask yourself if you're focusing too much on one of these planes. The spiritual plane. An example of this could be, just different things. Some people will pray and like sort of hope, and nothing will ever happen. And that's sort of what happens when you sort of tap into the mental and spiritual plane. It's a lot of hope going on, and hope is not necessarily a strategy. Like you genuinely need to. None of these planes are less important than the other. They're all just as important to manifesting a desired reality. However, the main thing I'm trying to get to you is that do not be fixed on one of the planes. Don't be fixed on one of the planes. And the crazy part about it, the crazy part is that 98% of people are only using one plane of existence. 98% of people are here. Only 2% are using the full 100%. Alright, so we want to be the exception. We want to be the full 2%. Okay. So, with that being said, the next rule, okay, so the first golden rule was basically understanding the three planes of existence. Now the second golden rule is going to be your overall perception, or your emotional states, common beliefs, things of that nature. So you want to have straight positive beliefs. You want to have straight positive beliefs, but that is easier said than done, because as people, especially of late, we sort of become a bit we sort of become logical. We're very logical thinkers. And oh, what am I doing? All right, so let's just go through this thing. Common beliefs, overly logical and objective beliefs. It's very limiting. Become very logical in the way we think. So things like affirmations, we don't really believe in affirmations, because you can tell yourself that you're perfect all you want, but then if you don't believe it, then you're not, it's just not going to happen. Like, you're not going to believe it. So that's what we want to stay away from. We sort of want to be optimistic in a way. We sort of want to think like a child, at least in the way that we're gullible to believing things. Now if we're able to allow ourselves to believe in the good things, sort of separate, sort of have those moments of time where we find ourselves sort of getting into these type of bad emotional states: shame, guilt, apathy, jealousy, frustration, fear. Sort of deconstruct and sort of understand why we feel that way. Sort of view things from a third person perspective, because I'm telling you right now, you will feel these things. You will feel these things, and the longer you are in the longer you're in a state of straight negative, the more it will just reflect in your life. If you are in a negative emotional state, nothing good will ever come in your life. You know why? because your perception is directly interconnected to your projection of reality. If you have a negative perception over life, then your reality is simply just going to reflect that to you. You get me? Your reality is simply just going to be negative. So you obviously want to have a positive perception of life. All right. So that is what some common beliefs like this would be life is hard. But then there's another quote. How do I say this? It's important to understand that. Do I even have the quote? All right, now I know the quote off by heart. So it's important to understand that there are no subconscious beliefs other than what there are no truths other than what the subconscious mind believes as true. So if you have subconsciously, you know, your subconscious is basically your second mind in a way. It's basically what you think, but without thinking. It's not necessarily your conscious, because your conscious mind, you have some type of control over your conscious mind, whereas the subconscious mind is sort of wild in a way that it does not care about emotions. Your subconscious mind is, it almost has a mind of its own. So if and the way you solidify different subconscious thoughts is obviously through your perception and the things you've experienced and the things you believe as true. So if you believe that life is hard, if you believe that's a truth, then look, go back to the saying. There, like, write this down. There are no truths other than what the subconscious mind believes as true. So if the subconscious mind believes that life is hard, you know, the subconscious mind wants to live in scarcity, then that'll be true. If the subconscious mind is in a survival paradigm, which is basically any of these levels, then it will simply just reflect in your reality. What you want to do is sort of get your subconscious mind, or just yourself in general. If you are able to sort of consciously believe this, then over time it'll reflect in your consciousness. It'll sort of seep down into your consciousness. Sort of view it like this. Let me see. Let me make a text. Let me make this one big. Make it big. Pause. Sort of see it as this. Conscious. Yeah, I spelled that shit wrong. But then that's besides the point. Subconscious. I bet. You see, sort of view it like this. Sort of view a line here. If you're sort of able to consciously believe that you're in a spiritual paradigm, you're in a place of enlightenment, peace, joy, then it will soon sort of, think about this as a surface. Think about like a surface being here, and then you sort of take, like watering a plant. Your plants, your consciousness is the plants, and then your subconscious is sort of the roots. You get me? And then think about it as soil, as a thing right here. If you're sort of able to water your consciousness with the spiritual paradigm, which is basically feelings of peace, joy, love, then it'll soon seep into your subconsciousness. Your subconscious will believe it as true, and because your subconscious believes that as true, that is your perception of life. And remember, your perception is directly interconnected to your projection of life. If your perception is one of peace, love, joy, then your reality will simply just prove it to you, right? I Okay, I know I just said that there's no important and more important, but obviously, this is the first step. Honestly, this is the first step to manifesting a desired reality. Your emotional state is everything, and they don't teach us this in school. Your emotional state is everything. And then now the third golden rule of manifestation: align your focus and attention to your desired reality. Attention is honestly one of the greatest things that God has ever given to us. It's like one of those things where it's like it can either make or break you. If you want to sort of put your attention in bad things, then that's just how it goes. So imagination and attention. These are notes from The Power of Awareness by Gary Neville. It's a really good book. I am reading it now. I do recommend it. That's like crazy how I'm recommending books. I don't do that often. So your imagination can accomplish anything. based on how well focused your attention is. Achieving your desires relies on controlling and concentrating your attention. So so I said, where you concentrate your attention is, you know, it's one of the most important things. But also, it's important to understand that there are two different types of attention. There's attention based from the external. The external is basically the physical plane, and we did touch on this. There's attention too based on this. So stuff like money, drugs, car. If your if your happiness or if your internal state is solely dependent on the external, which is basically things outside of you, then you're completely doing things wrong. If you are only able to be money, if you what am I saying? If you're only able to be happy because of these things, then you are mistaken. You're in the wrong place. This is external things. If women, cars, money, if those are the things that only make you happy, then you're completely getting it wrong, my friend. What you want to desire is these things, but then obviously reality is an illusion. Our reality sort of eludes you to believe in that it gives you these things. However, it doesn't. You think that money, sex, all that type of shit will get you, spiritual regime. However, it won't, because if we're being honest, all of that just has, it's not long term, it's short term peace, joy, love. Once you get the car, at some point you're gonna get used to it. It's gonna turn. Once you bust a nut, it's not gonna be the same afterwards. So that is subconscious based from the external. Your attention cannot solely be based on what happens outside of you. You know, do not equate the external to only negative, right? What this means is that do not solely do not hate it, is what I'm saying. Do not say fuck the external, or else, if you hate the external, then what makes you think that you receive things of the external? If you hate money, or if you hate what the things that money does to people, then what makes you think that you receive it? You get me? Um, the next thing that I want you guys to the next type of attention is subjective attention or intuition, which is mostly something that you want to get into. So, it's control from the external is limited because it's subjective. When you think subjectively, you think with less limitations. It's more from the heart. It's more from the heart, which is obviously one of the common beliefs that most people have. I have more than enough. Fuck you. I do what I want. Subjective thinking. Subjective thinking is very important. You want to sort of stride away from objective thinking. Uh, based on or influenced by personal feelings of taste or opinion, things of that nature. So now the importance of subconscious attention, subjective attention. Subjective attention has the ability to change life for the better when it is controlled. If you consciously let external distractions dominate your attention, achieving this control becomes difficult. Practice daily control. So obviously change does not necessarily happen like this, at least when it comes to your emotional state or how you think. See it as a gradual change. Try and sort of try and sort of like write down how you feel, week in, week out. Like I know it sounds kind of weird, but like do journaling, but like journaling really helps to at least write down or like read some books a day. It's crazy to say, but it's not crazy. It actually helps a lot. Attention is important. Make a daily effort to withdraw from the external world. So make a daily effort to withdraw from physical things. If you believe that this is what brings enlightenment, peace, joy, then you're wrong. You need to find that inside. You need to find that inside. What else? Uh, Change does not happen overnight. Like I said, you need to persevere. You need to keep fighting, and you need practice makes perfect. That's the only way that you can get better. Practice makes perfect. So, with that being said, my name is Fulu. I'm a spiritual growth coach, and I'm here to guide you. You guys have a nice day, and yeah.